You're saying Hillary, by running for president with all this baggage, has like put herself way out on a limb, and all Trump has to do is take any of these tools. There's like the reciprocating saw, there's a chainsaw, there's a hand saw, there's a pole saw, there's all these different saws, and he's trying to cut that limb off by taking some like toilet paper and twisting it together and using friction. And we're all like, that's not going to work. And clearly the tools exist to cut that branch off.
Please allow her to respond. She didn't talk while you talked.
Yes, that's true. I didn't.
Because
I didn't in the first debate, and I'm going to try not to in this debate, because I'd like to get to the questions that the people have brought here tonight to talk to us about.
And get off this question.
Okay, Donald.
No, when Kevin was talking before about the liability of Huma Abedin, I was just thinking Donald Trump is so incompetent that he's not beating Hillary Clinton by like 30 points right now. He picks the worst points of attack. And it goes back to Weiner, because he said Abedin she shouldn't have this access that she has because she's married to someone who tweets pictures of his dick. Is basically Trump's argument.
Look,
right?
if you worked on Wall Street and
this information is available, like what Kevin said about all these connections, like that information is available. It's like Trump takes and maybe that's by design, maybe that's his strategy to say, okay, what's right and what's wrong? Okay, this is the right thing. What is the stupidest argument I can make in favor of the right thing? You know, because he did the same thing when he gave a speech on economics, when he's talking about free trade, and then he blames, all the loss of jobs in Michigan on free trade. But he doesn't explain what free trade is. He doesn't explain why NAFTA isn't free trade. He doesn't factor into that the impact of like political corruption and unions on the automotive industry. He says free trade is the problem, so protectionism is the answer. But he makes terrible arguments and has terrible conclusions and terrible prescriptions.
You're saying Hillary, by running for president with all this baggage, has like put herself way out on a limb, and all Trump has to do is take any of these tools. There's like the reciprocating saw, there's a chainsaw, there's a hand saw, there's a pole saw, there's all these different saws, and he's trying to cut that limb off by taking some like toilet paper and twisting it together and using friction. And we're all like, that's not going to work. And clearly the tools exist to cut that branch off.
Even Steve Bannon, the new CEO of the the Trump campaign, why doesn't he just say, hey, look, why don't you try to publicly connect Abedin to Saudi Arabia instead of to Anthony Weiner's dick pics? Like, I think there's a stronger, more ominous connection that might play better.
It's plausible she's a spy. And what does that mean? When she was on the other side of the firewall of the private server, she could be the one brokering the deals for the Clinton Foundation and then using the State Department's information and access. And when I get this Loftus interview, you can see how it all fits together, but he talks about how the State Department was the thing these people took over, and then they put a little State Department inside the CIA called the Office of, it was like how could I forget the abbreviation right now? But, they basically injected the State Department into the CIA, so that little piece in the CIA was bringing in the Nazis while the actual CIA was trying to hunt down the Nazis. And this still exists. And Hillary Clinton became the commandeer, the commander. She commandeered and became commander over that system. So it's brokering away America's secrets for money, and it's very similar to Bill Clinton giving the nuclear secrets to the Chinese during his reign.
Right.
Of terror.
Yeah, he really just lacks a lot of precision in his arguments, and I totally agree with that.
Can Trump not afford precision? Is that what the issue is? He needs to make a couple more bucks, or what is it, Kev?
I don't know. I think running in the Republican primary, I think it would probably be beneficial to be less precise, because he loves low income voters and low education voters, and he kept saying all these things. So I think it was more of like a slugfest where he went after the people he needed to go after, and you could just kind of brand somebody by saying.
But Brett's point was like the first two people Trump took out with precision and accuracy were the biggest threats to Hillary, and now he's just like carpet bombing bullshit when he has like tactical, like very strategic, surgical tools to take out his opponent in an intellectual capacity. I mean, the argument that Hillary is not responsible for those State Department emails that got leaked and all this other stuff is saying she's incompetent. And if she's incompetent, then she can't be president. And we should all then have a talk about why do we have a leader over 300 million people that we don't really elect anyway, and what's that all about? But that's another conversation.
Yeah, but just why does he go after the lowest common denominator of argument every time? He could read a Vanity Fair article and see that, in quotes, when Hum Abedin was 2 years old, the family moved to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, where the backing of Abdullah Omar Nassif, then the president of King Abdulaziz University. Her father founded the Institute of the Muslim Minority Affairs, a think tank that became the first editor of the Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs, which stated its mission in shedding light on minority Muslim communities around the world in the hope of securing the legitimate rights of the communities. It turns out that the Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs is an Abedin family business. Huma was an assistant editor there between 1996 and 2008. Her brother Hassan, 45, is a book editor for the journal and a fellow at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, where Nassif is chairman of the board of trustees. Huma's sister Hiba is an assistant editor of the journal. So it's like her family's responsible for setting up a little miniature CFR for the Saudis to have access to the Oxford Islamic Studies and all these different things. It says also that in the early years, as a patron of the Abedin's Journal, Nassif was the Secretary General of the Muslim World League, which Andrew McCarthy, the former Assistant U.S. Attorney, who prosecuted the blind Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman around the 93 bombing.
The one the FBI did. The guy they got the blind sheikh though, right?
Yeah, the guy who Osama bin Laden said was his blind sheikh. So the former Assistant U.S. Attorney, Andrew McCarthy, who prosecuted Rahman in the wake of the 93 bombing, claims that Nassif has long been the Muslim Brotherhood's principal vehicle for the international propagation of Islamic supremacist ideology. So even making the arguments that Trump makes against Islam and against having, a closer look at who gets led into the country and things, he can't find a Vanity Fair article.
Soros groups are on the ground enabling illegal immigrants to enter the U.S. and Europe. They have sought to influence the U.S. Supreme Court rulings on illegal immigration from Mexico. They've worked with Muslim and other groups to demonize Americans and Europeans who oppose open borders. So we just saw a lot of that in the UK. Slightly different issue, but same kind of rhetoric with Brexit. Yeah. And, of course, that's so anybody talking now about national sovereignty is a white supremacist alt-righter, in the mainstream media. My last show...
The alt-right, that's a new term they just made up in the past couple months. Because I heard Hillary say that. I was like, what is the alt-right?
It's right? What my most recent show is about, and it's a very interesting subject where you have what I described as a small doorway of very legitimate concerns through which all kinds of insanity and violent ideation can pour through. There are a lot of angry people out there who don't know a lot, and Donald Trump speaks to them very well. It's not about NAFTA or TPP or spy networks. It's about this guy's dick, and that's a real problem. And they say, yeah, it is probably, yeah. So he's speaking the language of a lot of very, very poorly informed people. He's mobilized a lot of these people. And the alt-right, while it does have a small core of intelligent and very competent thinkers and presenters, they are surrounded by and propped up by a lot of very dangerous neo-Nazi types. So Hillary Clinton's speech about the alt-right, it's a little confusing as to why she gave it, unless this was just like her finishing move.
She was feeding trolls. She's like, Alex Jones, dark heart.
Well, there's that, but I mean, it's been a standard play for the Democrats at some point in a presidential campaign to, while they march forward with their, much more globalist agenda than a lot of the Republicans at least profess, the Ron Paul or the Mitt Romney or the Donald Trump has to stop and trip over himself and say, "Oh, I'm not a racist." Well, they just march forward. Yeah. I called it. It's like throwing out bananas for people to slip on.
It's psychological warfare tactics. That's what we're running into.
That is a very, very organized campaign, which appears to be a tactic of the political left in the United States. But this article suggests that it is more of a global strategy for anybody who wants to defend sovereignty over, some kind of internationalism, that they're xenophobic and isolationist and racist and either a racial or an ethnic supremacist. So that's been a very effective campaign. And, the interesting thing is that immigration, borders is kind of a big blind spot, especially with a lot of the circles that I hang out in and I travel in, because, libertarians generally say that, well, we should have open borders. Free people should be able to move freely from one place to another. Well, the people coming to the United States from Syria or Mexico, those aren't free people. And even the movement now, if you look at what's directing people, it's more like an importation campaign. It certainly was the case in Europe. Those were government projects to bring those people into European countries. In some kind of, at least on the surface, the cover they used for it was to promote multiculturalism.
It's progressive.
Which, when these free people move freely to this other place, like, say, the United States, well, the government still exists. So it's not some kind of libertarian utopia.
No.
Just because we removed one of the restrictions of government that we don't like, which is like, strong borders. They get here. The rest of the political state still exists. These people come in and they're going to vie for control of the political state over time. Open borders arguments are happening for a reason. The people who are encouraging them, it's not humanitarian. It never has been. When Donald Trump said Hillary Clinton is a bigot, it was a soundbite, but there's obviously a lot of truth to that the left uses these people as numbers.
But Trump doesn't have anyone on his team that actually can articulate his little sound bites, and thus he looks dumb. And so is it? He can't afford people to actually help him with those things? No. Right?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
What's the definition of a border? If we're talking in terms of our bodies, Brett, what would your border be?
I'd love if I could get like 10 feet in every direction. That might be a little much.
And if someone violates your borders against your will, it's either called violence or rape or something like that, right? It's not a good thing. It's not freedom, is my point.
Right, exactly.
So when people forget why we have borders, it's like, well, just because we might have had some freedoms in this country doesn't mean everyone else got those freedoms at the same time.
These things are not United States citizens' rights. They're human rights. And up to this point in history, at least, the United States has been less effective in violating them than other countries.
New master's better than the old master.
Right. Not that there isn't an effort to catch up, but the push of the article that we're reading. It says the notion at the heart of the push for the legalization of unfettered immigration is that states should not be able to protect their national identities.
Oh my goodness!
So that's Soros's. They're saying that's Soros's vision.
Yeah.
But it's tricky because
that's what his vision is.
A lot of these, this Jerusalem publication obviously has a nationalist bent, which is fine. But whenever there's discussions about states having rights or nations having rights or
Palestinians having rights.
Yeah,
How dare you?
States don't have rights, governments don't have rights, groups don't have rights, individuals do. So I think that in this context, we'd pick national sovereignty over having like some kind of globalist set of values imposed.
Yeah.
Right? Because what we want is individual rights to be protected.
Right.
So if that's not a priority in this conversation, we at least have to stop at like national God, and now it's tricky with the language. The laws of a nation protecting the individual rights, right? So you can't break apart the individual laws of the laws of an individual nation, because then you're just under some kind of global governance or EU or something like that. So I guess we do have to side with national sovereignty here, even though that's not something that I have a strong belief in.
Extremely on point. What I hear you highlighting is a conflict between practicality and ideology, and realizing that there are people that will play open society, very libertarian, voluntary type sounding movements.
Koch brothers, Soros,
to further their own goals.
Yeah, and I love that stuff, Kevin. That stuff is near and dear to my heart, but unfortunately, it's 500 years away. So
exactly.
Because we're born into a system ongoing.
And that's a great, it's okay to be able to acknowledge that, and I'm in agreement on the philosophy as well. But it really is 500 years away. It is not without the technology to propagate these ideas in a way. We're not going to get to the non-nation state. So there are benefits for George Soros to support Hillary Clinton and to legalize 11 million illegal aliens, because that creates a voter bloc. So that's a practical thing. That creates a voter bloc because the other guy's clearly racist, right? That's the narrative. It's clearly racist. So those 11 million people are going to most likely vote for who? And what does that change about every single election from now until I'm dead?